This is your macroeconomic video on bank runs. As you've probably noticed from our discussion of a fractional reserve banking system, that there are a lot of downsides to this. By issuing a bunch of credit to people, people can overspend, they generate a lot of personal debt for themselves, and this is how people get into a lot of debt and they don't actually grow wealth. The other thing that can happen are really serious bank runs. And you can see that the entire banking system could collapse. If banks decide to loan money out to people who can't pay it back, or they don't pay it back on time with interest, then all of the people whose money was loaned based on that original deposit goes away. Now, if you imagine now a macroeconomic recession, where lots of people unexpectedly start losing their jobs. So they borrowed money to buy a house. They plan to pay that back over 20 or 30 years. Nobody expected that 10 years after they get a house, they're going to lose their jobs. Or there's going to be a pandemic and people can't work anymore. Now what do? You have this legal obligation to pay the money back, but there are no jobs available in the economy. So when you have large-scale recessions and more people start losing their incomes when they didn't expect it, suddenly lots of people who borrowed money can't pay it back. And now the bank is kind of stretched really thin. How do we have all of these loans out there that are not going to be paid back with interest? And we've got to keep our balance sheet balanced. So you have to have the same amount of money on your assets and liability side. So one of the things that this does is create what's referred to as a run on banks. If people in the general public suspect that their bank is in trouble or that there is a recession, people go to the bank and remove their money. And when we remove money, the amount of money that is in the bank's deposits and able to be loaned out is reduced. But remember, if you decide that you want to go to the bank right now and remove all of your money from the bank, all of your checking and all of your savings, the bank actually doesn't have your money. It exists in the computer, but the bank itself has given your money to somebody else. And remember, they only have cash on hand in what's referred to as the excess reserve. So if they keep, let's say, 5% or 10% of the money in excess reserves. So if people in large scale start to go to banks and remove it, it used to be that you literally had to go into the bank in person, hence run to the bank to withdraw your funds. And the first people in line would get their money back and everybody else would not. So this is what happens like in the Great Depression. Once you have given out some money to people, the bank literally has no money left. All of the money is out in loans that may or may not be paid back, and now the bank goes bankrupt and people lose their money. So this is one of the threats of a fractional reserve banking system. The bank doesn't actually have enough reserves to pay off all of the depositors should all of or most of the bank's customers want to close their accounts. So typically the banks are trying to guess how many people are going to come in and withdraw money or use money on any, let's say, day or weekly basis. And if they, let's say, fall short, the bank can borrow money from a competitor bank. And they borrow that money, they balance all of their accounts, and they have to, of course, pay that money back with interest. And this happens regularly in the free market banking system. They often borrow from each other really short-term loans. But when you have big recessions that are happening, and almost all of the banks have people removing more money than they predicted, or more and more people are losing their jobs and can't pay back their loans, then you've got a macro-wide run on the bank that's typically related to recessions.